Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
All right, so, Mr. Trump. What's he said now is the question, I suppose.
Just when you
this
think
is in the Telegraph.
Yeah, and just when you think a potential Trump presidency couldn't get any crazier or, in fact, scarier, he manages to do it. The Telegraph has got this story about him asking, I think during a foreign affairs briefing, 3 times about nuclear weapons. If we've got nuclear weapons, why can't we use them?
What concerns you most about Donald Trump?
How erratic he is, Joe. I can argue about this position or that position. I do that with the current president, but he's inconsistent. And when you're the head of a global superpower, inconsistency, unpredictability, those are dangerous things. They frighten your friends and they tempt your enemies. And so I would be very, very concerned.
And Chip Reid now joins us from Washington. Chip, we just heard Madam Secretary Clinton referring to Senator Cruz's proposal to actively police Muslim American neighborhoods. And now Donald Trump appears to be looking to aggressively one-up him with anti-Muslim rhetoric. I want to let the watchers listen to what Trump had to say about using nuclear weapons to fight ISIS.
I'm never going to rule anything out, right. And I wouldn't want to say, even if I felt it wasn't going, I wouldn't want to tell you that, right. Because at a minimum, I want them to think maybe we would use it, okay? Right. It's the worst thing when we do these interviews with everybody, not me, and you ask a question like that, and everybody comes clean and they're so honest. You know, we need unpredictability.
Good red meat, perhaps, for the Republican base in the primary, Chip, but this could come back then to haunt Donald Trump in the general election.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure there are Democrats all over Washington and wherever else right now imagining ads portraying Donald Trump as reckless and asking, is this the guy you want to have his finger on the nuclear button?
Your most controversial suggestion was don't take nuclear weapons. I mean, you may have been hooked into this by a press question.
Don't take what?
Nuclear weapons off the table. I have been trying to think how we could conceivably use a nuclear weapon in the Middle East or in Europe in fighting ISIS. Where can you and why put it on the table or leave it on the table if you can't imagine where to use it?
I didn't say don't take it. I said I would be very, very slow and hesitant.
Well, why wouldn't you just say I don't want to talk about it? I don't want to talk about nuclear weapons. Presidents don't talk about use of nuclear weapons.
The question was asked. We're talking about NATO, which, by the way, I say is obsolete.
But you got hooked into something you shouldn't have talked about.
I think, well, someday, maybe.
Maybe?
Of course. If somebody
where would we drop a nuclear weapon in the Middle East?
Let me explain. Somebody hits us with a nuke.
ISIS.
You wouldn't fight back with a nuke?
No, to drop a nuclear weapon into a community of people
you can't say. First of all, you don't want to say take everything off the table.
No, just
you're
nuclear.
A bad negotiator if you do that.
Just nuclear.
Look, nuclear should be off the table. But would there be a time when it could be used? Possibly.
Okay, the trouble is when you said that, the whole world heard. David Cameron in Britain heard it. The Japanese, where we bombed them in 45, heard it. They're hearing a guy running for president of the United States talking of maybe using nuclear weapons. Nobody wants to hear that about an American president.
Why are we making them? Why do we make them? We have
because of the old mutual assured destruction which Reagan hated.
Just so
and tried to get rid of.
I was against Iraq. I'd be the last one to use the nuclear weapons.
So can you take it off the table
that's
now?
Sort of like the end of the
Can you tell
ballgame.
the Middle East we're not using the nuclear weapon?
I would never say that. I would never take any of my cards off the table.
How about Europe? We won't use it in Europe.
I'm not going to take it off the table.
You might use it in Europe?
No, I don't think so. But I'm not
just say it. I'll never use a nuclear weapon in Europe.
I am not taking cards off the table. I'm not going to use nukes, but I'm not taking any cards off the table.
The trouble is that the sane people hear you, and the insane people are not affected by your threats. That's the trouble. The real fanatics say, good, keep it up.
I think they're more affected than you might think.
The 3 Republican candidates each spent an hour last night taking questions from Anderson Cooper on CNN. Some of Donald Trump's positions are new to American politics and, frankly, could alter the security of everyone on this planet. Let's bring in Rebecca Berg. She's the national political reporter for Real Clear Politics. Rebecca, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Chef.
For decades, one of the bedrocks of American foreign policy has been stopping nuclear proliferation, and specifically providing security to some of our allies in exchange for, at least in part, that they not seek nuclear weapons. That's been true under all administrations, Republican and Democrat. Donald Trump is promoting a new policy. Listen.
So you have no problem with Japan and South Korea having nuclear weapons?
At some point, we have to say, you know what, we're better off if Japan protects itself against this maniac in North Korea. We're better off, frankly, if South Korea is going to start to protect itself.
Saudi Arabia, nuclear weapons?
Saudi Arabia, absolutely.
You would be fine with them having nuclear weapons?
No, not nuclear weapons, but they have to protect themselves.
But if you say to Japan, yes, it's fine, you get nuclear weapons, South Korea, you as well, and Saudi Arabia says we want them too.
Can I be honest with you? It's going to happen anyway. It's going to happen anyway. It's only a question of time.
It's going to happen anyway. Has there been reaction to this?
I mean, it's a completely perplexing statement, given what you said, the context of this being that U.S. policy has been for many, many years to try to limit nuclear proliferation. The fact that Donald Trump would say, well, it's going to happen anyway, so what does it matter, it really flies in the face of what United States policy has been on this for many, many years. Now, just because it has been the policy doesn't mean it's right. But if you look at what Donald Trump is saying by suggesting that countries who are under threat of attack by other countries, so South Korea, Japan, under threat of potential attack by North Korea, saying that those countries should have nuclear weapons is kind of akin to the argument of saying a good guy with a gun could stop a bad guy with a gun, except we're talking about nuclear weapons here, Chef, and I think many of our U.S. allies would be very startled to hear this sort of language.
And the Pentagon, from all that I know of everybody there and the reporting of Jennifer Griffin, the Pentagon would not be in favor of this proposal.
No, not at all. And Donald Trump has said that if he is president, he would listen to his generals. I think many of his generals, if he is president, would be suggesting that this is probably an ill-advised policy to be pushing for. But Donald Trump was waffling a little bit in his answer with Anderson Cooper. He clearly left a little bit of space there, saying that, well, it's going to happen anyway, so what does it matter? Maybe leaving some space to walk this back a little bit later on, but we'll have to see.
I suppose there's space.
Harold Hayden, Harold Ford, very, very quickly. Who amongst your peers that you respect greatly, whether they think like you or not think like you, that you know that's advising Mr. Trump?
No one.
Do you still feel like you know more about ISIS than the generals?
Well, they don't know much because they're not winning. That I can tell you. Now, I think they're not winning for a different reason. I think Obama's hurting them.
How so?
It's being run, well, from what I hear, it's being run from the White House. It's all being run from the White House. I've spoken to certain generals. I'll keep it quiet as to who, but highly respected people. They say we could knock them out fast.
In office now generals or retired generals?
In one case in office and in one case out of office. And they said, both of them said the same thing. If we had the leadership, meaning the go-ahead, you could knock them out fast. For some reason, Obama's not doing that.
Several months ago, a foreign policy expert on the international level went to advise Donald Trump, and 3 times he asked about the use of nuclear weapons. 3 times he asked, at one point, if we have them, why can't we use them? That's one of the reasons why he just doesn't have foreign policy experts around.
Trump asked 3 times.
3 times in an hour briefing, why can't we use nuclear weapons?
Let me ask you about Libya. You've been highly critical of Libya and Hillary Clinton. You were also for military action to oust Gaddafi and military action to take care of the humanitarian situation in Libya. You supported that.
When you say I supported it, I supported Libya?
Yeah, you supported intervention in Libya.
I did? Where do you see that?
In a video blog from 2011, you said,
now, we should go in, we should stop this guy, which would be very easy and very quick. We could do it surgically, stop him from doing it, and save these lives.
That's a big difference from what we're talking about. I mean,
but you were for intervention.
Don't forget, I'm the only one. I made a lot of money with Gaddafi, if you remember. He came to the country, and he had to make a deal with me because he needed a place to stay, and he paid me a fortune, never got to stay there, and it became sort of a big joke. But the fact is that Libya was a disaster from the standpoint of the way it was handled. I mean,
but you were for intervention, just to clear that up.
I was for doing something, but I wasn't for what you have right now. And right now, ISIS has their oil, John. ISIS is selling. That's among the finest oil in the world. ISIS has taken over the Libyan oil. And we don't do blockades. We don't do anything. They're selling it. They're making a fortune with it. So we go out. We do Libya. We do it poorly as you can do it. You can't do worse. And then now, if you look at what's happened, I mean, the end result is ISIS is selling the oil, and it's a total mess.
This is one of the things that confuses some people about your positions, though. You said you weren't for intervention, but you were for intervention in Libya.
I didn't mind surgical, and I said surgical. You do a surgical shot, and you take them out. but I wasn't for what happened. Look at the way it's, I mean, look at with Benghazi and with all of the problems that you've had, it was handled horribly.
That's not the way it's supposed to be. Since then you said you were never for interventions.
I was never for a strong intervention. I could have seen surgical where you take out Gaddafi and his group.
The steps, Donald Trump decides to use a nuclear weapon. What is the time frame between his decision and when the nuclear weapons are launched?
Joe, it's scenario dependent, but the system is designed for speed and decisiveness. It's not designed to debate the decision.
The sort of question, actually, that when I was teaching, if a 16-year-old had asked me, I would have said it was silly. But the idea that this is a man who is potentially getting his hands on the nuclear codes really is very worrying. And I think it's the reason why increasingly you're seeing senior Republicans peeling away from him, and even in quite a few cases saying, and publicly saying, we're now going to vote for Hillary Clinton.
And these latest pictures, I think in Daytona, he said, he called Hillary Clinton the devil earlier this week, and tonight he said that she is effectively the founder of Islamic State.
And interestingly, it was a rally of his own supporters, but the reaction from the audience, they weren't quite sure how to react to that. So even they are becoming a little bit suspicious of Donald Trump. And it's all very well having sort of rallies of people that supposedly adore you, but when you're even losing them, you're in trouble. And his campaign, make no mistake, is in trouble. They can't raise money. Now, he's a very rich man, so no doubt he can contribute. They can't raise money. The polls are really going against Trump now. You would expect it in a way because Hillary Clinton was always going to get a bounce out of her convention, but she got a much bigger bounce in the polls than he did after his. And you look at some of the polling in some of the marginal states, and it's quite difficult to see how he can win. Now, that's great for people who fear a Trump presidency, but anything could happen between now and then. I have to say, I'm really looking forward to the debates, because Hillary Clinton ought to trump him in the debates, I guess.
See what you did there,
Did you see that?
Yeah,
It's a bit obvious, wasn't it? But
because he hasn't got a baying crowd and he hasn't got people briefing him.
And he's got to have a knowledge of policy, and he hasn't got that. You look on the Trump website and it's almost a policy-free zone. And I can't recall him ever giving a policy speech on anything.
But he could get briefed, can't he, to deal with those sorts of questions?
But it will become really obvious, particularly on things like security and foreign policy, against Hillary Clinton, who's got an enormous depth of knowledge, who, as both Bill and Barack Obama have said, is more qualified to be president than they were when they started. She is going to appear and be the serious, knowledgeable person against him. Now, the only problem is, of course, that I don't think his strategy is to be serious. It's not about having policy. It's about being the outsider. It's about being, you know, the more that the establishment, Republican or Democrat, criticise him, the better it is for him, because that's his argument, isn't it?
I mean, I've studied American politics for a long time, and particularly presidential elections, and I don't see how he can win a majority just with that strategy. Now, it can be part of his strategy, but he's got to appeal much more widely than the sort of Midwest redneck vote, which is what he's going for at the moment.
And then not endorsing some of the most senior Republicans around, Senator John McCain, and the House Speaker as well.
And that goes down really badly. John McCain, an American war hero, very respected senator, and people scratch their head and think, well, why wouldn't he do that?
Although that's less important almost than Ian's other point about he has not and doesn't seem to be able to build a coalition that includes women voters, for example, that includes Hispanics, that includes black voters and you can't win a US presidential election unless you've got a broader coalition than he's got at the moment. But he's got a strategy and he's sticking to it. And we were talking earlier on about the idea that perhaps once he'd got the nomination, he would become that more sensible, more centrist candidate. Well, he's clearly decided that's not the way he's going to play it.
Yeah, or he can't do it. We'll have to wait and see, won't we?
But I'm good at war. I've had a lot of wars of my own. I'm really good at war. I love war. I would bomb the shit out of him.
I'm more militaristic than anybody in this room. I know more about ISIS than the generals do, believe me.
When Donald Trump speaks about foreign policy, it scares the hell out of me.
We're about to turn over the nuclear codes of the United States to an erratic individual.
And you can tell them to go themselves.
Harry Truman, with what he did, having the guts to drop the bomb And here's a man who would do the same thing.
I'd blow up every single inch. There would be nothing left. 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 There would be nothing left.